The room was dark, lit only by the faint glow of strange symbols on the walls. Dust filled the air, making every breath feel heavier. It was the kind of place most people avoided, but not Dr. Thomas Blake. He had spent years searching for answers. And today, he was about to uncover one of the greatest mysteries known to mankind, in the heart of the abandoned laboratory. A glowing portal hovered in the middle of the room, casting an eerie blue light across the space. The walls were covered in ancient writing, symbols that no one had ever been able to understand. Thomas had read every piece of research on this portal, every theory, every failed attempt. There was no doubt in his mind. This was a doorway, too. Something no one had dared to explore. For centuries, alien civilizations had tried to figure out what lay beyond this hole. They had come close but never crossed the threshold. Some said it was a gate to another dimension. Others believed it was a prison, holding something dangerous. But one thing was certain. No alien species had ever successfully entered. Thomas wasn't an alien, though. He was human. And that in itself made him different. The one thing the aliens couldn't account for was human curiosity, the kind of curiosity that had driven Thomas to this point. Despite the warnings, despite the hundreds of alien warnings that were buried in the archives of failed expeditions, he was determined to step through. He had always believed that humans were capable of more than anyone gave them credit for. He stood before the portal, his heart racing. His fingers brushed lightly against the glowing edge of the hole, sending a ripple through the air. It felt alive, almost as if it were waiting for him to make the first move. The faint whisper of voices echoed in his mind, alien voices that had failed to cross before. It was as if they were warning him, trying to reach him, urging him to turn back. But Thomas was not afraid. His eyes narrowed, his resolve hardening. He had come all this way. He had studied the research, analyzed the data, and now it was time to test the theories. There was no turning back now. He took a deep breath and stepped closer to the glowing portal. His feet felt light, as if the ground beneath him were disappearing. He hesitated for just a moment, his mind racing with the possibilities. What if the warnings were true? What if the portal was a trap waiting to swallow him whole? But then Thomas smiled to himself. The unknown was what he thrived on. It was what made him different from everyone else. If anyone could survive this, it would be him. With one final glance at the room, he closed his eyes and leaped into the hole. His body felt weightless, as if he was falling through time and space. The world around him blurred, and for a moment, everything went dark. In the silence, the whispers grew louder. They weren't warnings anymore. They were voices of curiosity, alien voices mixed with human echoes. They whispered of forgotten truths, of ancient civilizations that had sought the same answers. Their words blurred together, but Thomas understood. He was not the first to attempt this, but he would be the first to succeed. He felt a sudden jolt, and for a moment the darkness enveloped him. He opened his eyes, but there was no light, no glow. He had no idea where he was. The air felt thick, and the ground beneath him felt unstable. Thomas stumbled, catching himself on the rough surface. His heart raced. He was in an unfamiliar place, a world unlike anything he had ever seen. The very air felt different, like it was alive. The whispers stopped. Silence. He tried to make sense of his surroundings, but everything was alien. Floating rocks hovered in the air, and strange creatures' shadows at first moved in the distance. There was no sign of the portal. The hole was gone. He was alone. The silence stretched, pressing down on him. He could feel the weight of the world around him, but he wasn't afraid. This was what he had come for, the unknown. He had crossed the boundary that no one else had dared to approach. But then, a low growl echoed through the air. Thomas turned sharply, his heart leaping in his chest. In the distance, two glowing eyes appeared, watching him. More creatures emerged, their shapes indistinct, their presence menacing. Thomas stood his ground. He had no weapon, no knowledge of where he was, but one thing was clear. He was not going back. Not now. Not after everything. He had leaped through the hole, and now he was here. And he wasn't going to let fear dictate his next move. He raised his hands, his eyes scanning. The creatures that had gathered around him. No, this was just the beginning. The moment Thomas hit the ground, it felt as though reality itself had been twisted. The world around him wasn't like anything he had seen before. There were no familiar stars in the sky, no comforting moon hanging above. Instead, the sky was a swirling mix of colors, purples, blues, and fiery oranges blending together, so the very atmosphere itself was alive. The air was heavy and smelled faintly of metal and something organic, something that he couldn't quite place. His body felt off balance, as though gravity itself was behaving differently here. He stumbled, his feet unsteady on the alien surface beneath him. Looking down, he realized he wasn't standing on solid ground, he was standing on a floating platform of sorts. A giant stone that hovered in the middle of an expansive chasm. Below him, a vast abyss stretched endlessly, its bottom lost in shadow. The ground seemed to pulse with a low hum, vibrating under his feet. In the distance, massive structures hovered, their jagged silhouettes breaking the horizon. They weren't. Like any architecture Thomas had ever encountered, they seemed to defy the laws of physics, suspended in midair with no visible means of support. He could see faint lines of light coursing through their sides, pulsing like veins, suggesting that they were alive, perhaps powered by something more than just technology. Thomas blinked, shaking his head, trying to make sense of his surroundings. He had expected something strange, yes, but this was beyond any theory he had ever read. The colors of the sky, the floating rocks, the structures, they all spoke of a civilization far beyond anything Earth had ever known. As he took a few hesitant steps, the ground shifted beneath him. He looked down to see the platform he was standing on slowly tilting toward the edge of the chasm. His heart raced as the platform began to move, sliding across the air with an unnatural smoothness. With no time to think, he grabbed onto a nearby jagged rock formation sticking out of the platform. His fingers tightened around it, desperate to hold on. Suddenly, a loud screech pierced the air, a sound so sharp it made Thomas's bones rattle. From behind a towering structure, a group of creatures appeared, their shapes almost indistinguishable from the shadows. They were tall and lanky, with glowing eyes and elongated limbs, their movements fluid and unnerving. Thomas could feel their gaze fixated on him, as if they were studying him like an insect under a microscope. A cold shiver ran down his spine. He couldn't understand why, but he instinctively knew they weren't friendly. These were the guardians of this world, the ones who had waited for someone foolish enough to cross the line before he could react. One of the creatures stepped forward, its elongated arm reaching toward him. It extended with unnatural speed, and in an instant, it was standing just inches away from him. The creature's face was a blur of dark, shifting shadows, with only its glowing eyes clear. Thomas's heart hammered in his chest. There was no way out. He wasn't sure what he was supposed to do, but in the midst of this foreign world, surrounded by creatures who appeared to be centuries ahead of anything he had ever known, one thing was clear. He had to survive. He gathered his courage and slowly backed away from the creature, his eyes darting around the unfamiliar world. The ground beneath him seemed to grow unstable, like the very land was alive and constantly shifting. The creatures watched him, their glowing eyes never leaving his face. It was as though they were waiting for him to make a move. And then, as if by some unseen signal, the ground beneath his feet shifted again, causing him to lose his balance. His legs buckled, and he tumbled forward, barely catching himself before falling into the chasm. Panic surged through him as he scrambled to regain his footing. But the creatures made no move to stop him. They simply stood there, silent, watching. And in that moment, Thomas realized something important. This was not a test of strength. It was a test of will. They weren't interested in defeating him. They wanted to see if he had the strength to endure what lay ahead. With renewed determination, Thomas pulled himself to his feet, steadying himself against the rock. The creatures didn't move, and for the first time since he arrived, he felt a strange sense of clarity. This was his world now, and he was no longer just a man from Earth. He was something more. He was part of this strange and uncharted place. He took a deep breath, his eyes fixed on the creatures. They were still watching, waiting for his next move. Thomas didn't know what was going to happen next, but he knew one thing for certain. There was no turning back. Thomas could feel his heart pounding in his chest as the creatures continued to observe him. Their glowing eyes fixed with unnerving intensity. The silence stretched on like a heavy fog. For a moment, everything seemed to pause time itself. Holding its breath, the ground beneath him hummed softly, and the strange, shifting structures around him seemed to lean closer, as if they were eager to witness whatever would unfold next. One of the creatures stepped forward, its movements fluid and purposeful. Unlike the others, it wasn't merely watching, it was acting. Its elongated limbs moved with eerie precision, as though it had practiced this moment for centuries. The creature's body shimmered faintly, a translucent sheen that reflected the otherworldly light surrounding them. Thomas instinctively stepped back, but the creature's approach was slow, almost deliberate, like a predator waiting for its prey to make the first move. "Human," the creature said, its voice a strange, echoing whisper that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. It wasn't a language Thomas recognized. There were no words, no syntax he could relate to. Yet somehow he understood. The meaning of the word echoed in his mind with perfect clarity. It was a greeting, or maybe a warning. Thomas swallowed hard, his mind racing to make sense of the situation. Was this creature communicating with him? How was it possible to understand its meaning? He had never encountered anything like this before. No research, no book, no ancient theory could have prepared him for this moment. He was on the edge of something far beyond his comprehension. The creatures around him weren't offering any answers. The alien paused, its glowing eyes narrowing slightly. "You crossed the threshold," it continued. "No human has ever dared to enter. The consequences of your actions are irreversible." Thomas's pulse quickened. Irreversible? What did that mean? He had expected danger, but not this whatever it was. This was a different kind of threat. The creature didn't seem hostile in the traditional sense. The weight of its words, the ominous tone in its voice, suggested a complexity far beyond physical conflict. He took a step forward, curiosity overpowering his caution. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice trembling slightly, despite his best efforts to stay calm. The alien tilted its head, its gaze fixed on him with an expression that was, somehow, both curious and resigned. "This world is not for humans," it replied. "It is a place where time, space, and reality converge. It is a place of ancient knowledge and power, but it is also a place of danger. A danger that no alien species, no matter how advanced, has ever dared to fully understand. You human are not meant to be here." Thomas felt a chill run through him. His mind raced. Had he made a mistake? Should he have turned back? But his resolve remained firm. He had come this far, and he wouldn't let fear dictate his next move. "Why was it forbidden for humans to enter?" he asked, trying to push for answers. The creature's response was unexpected. It stepped closer, and for the first time, Thomas noticed the subtle sorrow in its expression, if one could call it an expression at all. The alien seemed conflicted, as though it was struggling with something deep within, because it said softly, "We know what lies beyond. We have seen the destruction it can cause. This world, this reality, holds power beyond imagination, but it is also a curse. A curse that has swallowed entire civilizations. No species has ever walked away from it unscathed." Thomas's mind whirred, the pieces of the puzzle slowly starting to come together. The creatures weren't just warning him, they were trying to understand him, trying to gauge if he, a human, had the strength to endure the consequences of what he had just done. This wasn't a test of physical strength. It was a test of something far more intangible, something that could not be measured by any technology, no matter how advanced. "I didn't come here for destruction," Thomas said, his voice steady. Despite the fear gnawing at his insides, "I came to understand, to learn, to explore the unknown." The alien studied him for a long moment. Then, it extended a hand toward him, its elongated fingers reaching out in a gesture that seemed almost human. But its eyes never left his. You seek knowledge, human, it said. But what you seek may destroy you. Before Thomas could respond, the ground beneath him shifted again, and the creatures around him moved, surrounding him in a circle. The air was charged with an energy he could feel deep in his bones. This was no longer about survival. It was about understanding. Something far more ancient, more profound. And in that understanding, Thomas realized, lay the key to everything. The creature's voice echoed in his mind once more. You have crossed the threshold, human. You must face the choice that no one before you has had the courage to make. Tension in the air was palpable. The moment of truth was upon him. Whatever lay ahead, it would not be an easy journey. But Thomas was no longer afraid. He had come this far, and now he would find out just what this world, and his place in it, truly meant. Thomas stood still, his mind racing as the creatures circled around him. The air crackled with an energy he could almost feel in his very bones. The glowing eyes of the aliens locked onto him, their presence overwhelming yet strangely inviting. There was no way to know what they were thinking, but their silence was almost suffocating. He glanced back at the creature that had spoken to him, still waiting for a response. The tall, glowing figure was now standing at the center of the group, an imposing yet serene presence. For the first time, Thomas noticed a faint aura around the Aliena ethereal shimmer that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. He could feel the weight of the words it had spoken earlier reverberating in his chest. You have crossed the threshold, the creature said once more, its voice echoing in Thomas's mind. Now, you must prove your worth. A sense of dread settled in Thomas's stomach. What did that mean? Prove his worth. He wasn't prepared for a test knot like this. The creature's words had hinted at something far beyond the realm of physical strength, something deeper, more personal. Thomas wasn't just here to survive. He was here to confront himself. Before he could respond, the air around him shimmered and rippled, as though the very fabric of the world was folding in on itself. In an instant, the ground beneath him disappeared, and he found himself standing in a vast, empty space, and a million, cold and alien. The chasm of the floating world was gone. The strange sky, the towering structures, all of it vanished. He was alone. The silence was deafening. It was as if the world itself was holding its breath, waiting for him to make a move. The air felt thick, oppressive, as if the very atmosphere was charged with expectation. His heartbeat echoed in his ears as he stood motionless, trying to make a sense of what had just happened. Suddenly, a voice, no, 1,000 voices spoke all at once, their words overlapping in a chaotic blend. It was both alien and familiar, the tone dark and unyielding. Face yourself, human, they intoned, their voices dripping with finality. The trial of will has begun. A sudden force gripped his mind, pulling him into a vision. The surroundings shifted violently, and Thomas found himself back on Earth. In a place he had long left behind, the research facility, where he had first learned of the mysterious portal. He saw himself in the same lab, but everything felt off. The air was stifling, and there was an overwhelming sense of wrongness, as though reality itself was bending to something unseen. But this wasn't just a vision. It was a memory. He saw himself young, full of ambition, standing at the edge of the same lab. The excitement of discovery was written on his face, but so was something else, an insatiable drive, a hunger for knowledge that had come at the cost of everything else. He had pushed everyone aside in his pursuit of answers. Friends, colleagues, even family, none of it mattered as much as what he could uncover. He had been blinded by his ambition. As the vision deepened, Thomas saw the consequences of that pursuit. His colleagues had turned against him, distrust growing as his obsession with the portal consumed him. He watched helplessly as relationships broke apart, his friends walking away, leaving him alone. The bitterness he felt in that moment resurfaced, and for a split second, he understood the price he had paid for his relentless pursuit of the unknown. The voices surrounded him, pressing harder. You abandoned those who cared for you. Sacrificed connection for ambition. Your will was always driven by the need to prove yourself. Thomas tried to shake the vision off, but it clung to him. He was trapped in his own past, forced to confront the very part of himself that he had tried to bury. He remembered how as a young man he had dismissed warnings, brushed aside doubts, believing that the answers he sought were worth any sacrifice. But now, in this moment, those sacrifices seemed hollow, even cruel. The world shifted again, and Thomas found himself back in the vast emptiness, breathless. His chest heaved as he struggled to process the truth of what he had just seen. This was the trial of will. It wasn't a test of physical endurance or strength. It was a test of his heart, his humanity, his choices. The voices spoke. Once more, this time softer, almost sympathetic. Do you see now, human? Your will has brought you here, but it has also been your downfall. Can you overcome the flaws within yourself? Thomas's mind reeled. Could he overcome them? Could he face the parts of himself that he had tried so desperately to ignore? The guilt, the regret, the loneliness, was he strong enough to confront it all? In that moment, Thomas understood. This wasn't just about surviving the trial, it was about healing, about finding redemption. The portal wasn't just a doorway to another world, it was a reflection of his own soul, a mirror showing him the deepest corners of his psyche. He straightened his back, feeling a sense of clarity he had never experienced before. It wasn't enough to survive, he had to change, to evolve. He had to embrace the flaws, the mistakes, and move beyond them. I am ready, he whispered. The words quiet but firm. The voices fell silent, and the world around him seemed to pulse with approval. The trial had been passed not by defeating an enemy, but by accepting himself. A new path unfolded before him. And for the first time since he had entered this alien world, Thomas felt like he had truly crossed a threshold, one that went beyond mere survival. This was his moment of transformation, and he was no longer the man who had stepped through the portal. He was something more. The moment Thomas completed the trial of will, he thought he had reached the end. He believed the truth had been revealed, that the alien world would offer him clarity and understanding. But as the last echoes of the voices faded away, the world around him shifted once again. Ground beneath his feet trembled, and the vast emptiness began to warp and distort. For a split second, Thomas felt his sense of reality slip away, just as he braced himself for what seemed like another test. A sudden gust of wind swept across the landscape. The air shifted in an unfamiliar direction, and a low hum vibrated in the atmosphere. His heart raced, and before he could even comprehend what was happening, a figure appeared before him, emerging from the shadows of the strange world. At first, Thomas thought it was another alien creature, but as the figure stepped forward, he realized it was different, more human, more familiar. Though still distinct in the alien environment, the figure was a woman, tall and slender, with shimmering skin that glowed faintly in the dim light. Her hair flowed like liquid silver, catching the hues of the alien sky, and her eyes sparkled with a depth that Thomas couldn't quite understand. There was an air of tranquility about her, but beneath it, a fierce determination. It was unlike anything he had ever seen, part human, part something else, something far beyond. "Who are you?" Thomas asked, his voice barely above a whisper. His mind was still reeling from the trial he had just faced. The woman smiled softly, her expression unreadable. "I am someone who has seen what you have not. Someone who has walked the path you are now on and survived it." Thomas blinked, his mind struggling to piece together what was happening. He had just come through a trial designed to confront his deepest fears and flaws. But now, in front of him, stood a figure who seemed to know more about this place than anyone. More than the aliens, more than even himself. "I don't understand," Thomas muttered, still uncertain whether he could trust her. "You don't need to understand yet," the woman replied, her voice calm but firm. "But you will. You are not the first to enter this world, Thomas. You're not the first to seek the knowledge that lies beyond the threshold. But unlike the others, you have the chance to change the course of this journey." Thomas stared at her, confused. "Others? You mean humans? Did they come here before me?" The woman nodded, stepping closer. "Yes, many have tried to enter, but they have all failed. Some of them came with ambition, others with greed, and some seeking power. But none of them were prepared for what they would find. They lost themselves in the trial. You, however, have a different purpose. Thomas's mind was spinning. He had been so sure that he was alone in his quest that he was the only human who had dared to cross the boundary. Now, standing before this woman, it became clear that his journey was part of something much larger, something far more significant than he could ever have imagined. "What do you mean?" he asked, still trying to comprehend. The woman's gaze softened as she regarded him. "The trial you just faced was only the beginning, Thomas. The world you've entered is not just a test of will, it is a test of the heart. The choices you make here, in this place, will have consequences far beyond your understanding. But you have an opportunity now, an opportunity to succeed where others have failed." Thomas felt a chill run through him. "What do I need to do?" "You will face challenges that will make the trial of will seem trivial in comparison," the woman warned. "There are forces, here forces, older than the universe itself that are watching you, judging you. But I can help you. I can guide you through what's to come, if you are willing to accept my help." Thomas hesitated. Every part of him screamed to push forward, to continue on his own, to prove to himself that he was strong enough to navigate this strange alien world by his own power. But he had learned through the trial that strength wasn't about independence. It was about understanding. It's about acknowledging his limitations and the need for others. "I don't know if I can trust you," Thomas said, his voice filled with doubt. "How do I know you're not part of the same dangers the aliens warned me about?" The woman's eyes flickered with something like sadness. "Because I was once where you are now. I was like you, seeking knowledge, seeking purpose. But I learned that some paths must be walked together. You are not alone in this, Thomas. You can't face the trials of this place by yourself." There was a long silence between them, the weight of her words sinking into Thomas's consciousness. He could feel the truth in them, even if he wasn't fully ready to accept it. With a deep breath, Thomas nodded. "I accept your help, but I need to understand what's at stake. Why is this world so dangerous?" The woman's eyes brightened as she smiled. "It is not the world that is dangerous. Thomas, it is the power that resides within it. Essence of this place is alive, and it seeks to control those who enter. But there is a way to harness that power, to understand it. If you can learn to control it, to connect with it, you will be the first human to unlock the true potential of this world." Her words hung in the air like a challenge, and Thomas felt a strange surge of determination within him. Longer just about survival. It was about mastering something beyond human understanding, something that would change everything. "Then let's begin," Thomas said, his voice steady and resolute. The woman nodded, and with that simple gesture, the path forward became clear. He wasn't alone anymore. The air around Thomas seemed to crackle with anticipation as the woman led him deeper into the unknown world. The strange alien landscape twisted and shifted beneath his feet, almost as though the world itself was responding to his presence. The colors of the sky darkened, and a heavy mist began to roll in, swallowing the floating platforms and jagged rock formations that surrounded them. The eerie hum of the world seemed louder now, vibrating through Thomas's very bones. They stopped. At the edge of a vast chasm, the ground beneath them seemingly hanging over an endless abyss. At the far end of the chasm stood a massive structure, a towering pyramid-like formation. Dark and jagged, covered in strange symbols and glowing lights. The energy emanating from it was palpable, a pulse that seemed to draw them in like a magnet. Thomas felt his breath catch in his chest. He knew what this place was, the heart of this world, the source of its power. But something about it felt wrong, as if it were waiting for them to make a move. He could sense a tan, invisible force that stretched across the entire landscape, binding everything together in a web of tension. "This is where it all began," the woman said softly, her voice barely a whisper against the eerie stillness. "The center of this world, the place where reality and time are bent, but it is also where the greatest danger resides." Thomas turned to her, his brow furrowed. "What kind of danger? What are we facing here?" She gave him a sad smile, her eyes distant, as though she were seeing something beyond the present moment. This place was created by an ancient race, far older than the universe itself. They built it as a vessel to hold unimaginable power, a force capable of altering reality itself. But that power has a price. Those who seek to control it are consumed by it. Thomas's heart sank. This wasn't just a test. This was a battle for something far greater than survival. They weren't merely fighting to stay alive. We're fighting for control of the very fabric of existence. And in that moment, Thomas knew that the power in this world had already chosen a side. It had chosen him. Before he could say anything, a deep rumbling shook the ground beneath them. The sky darkened further, and a shadow swept across the horizon. The woman's expression hardened, and she stepped back, her eyes flashing with something akin to fear. "He's here," she whispered. From the depths of the chasm, a figure emerged, tall, looming, with glowing eyes that burned with an intensity that seemed to pierce through the very fabric of the world. It was an alien, but not like the others. And this one was far older, far more powerful. It radiated an aura of control, as if it had been bound to this place for eternity, feeding off the very energy that fueled the world. The creature stepped forward, its every movement deliberate, measured.
Ow.
It was cloaked in a dark robe-like garment, its face hidden in shadow, but the power it exuded was undeniable. "You are foolish to come here," the creature's voice boomed, echoing across the chasm. "This world is not meant for your kind. It was never meant for you." Thomas took a step forward, his heart pounding in his chest. "I didn't come here to conquer or destroy. I came to understand, to learn." The creature laughed, a hollow, chilling sound that seemed to reverberate through the very air. "Understand? You cannot understand what you are dealing with. You are but a fleeting moment in the vastness of time. This world is ancient beyond your comprehension, and yet you seek to control it." The woman stepped in front of Thomas, her eyes now glowing with a quiet fury. "No one controls this place," she said, her voice steady, but filled with determination. "It is not a tool to be used. It is a force of nature, something that exists beyond the limitations of time and space. And it is not your right to wield it." The creature's glowing eyes shifted toward her, and for a moment Thomas could sense the tension between them. It was a battle of wills, ancient and bitter, stretching across the ages. The woman's presence seemed to challenge the very fabric of the world itself, but the creature wasn't intimidated. If anything, it seemed to draw strength from the conflict. "Foolish one," the creature hissed. "You believe you can stand against me? You have no idea what power you are up against." Thomas could feel the ground beneath him tremble, the very air thick with the weight of the creature's power. It wasn't just the creature's strength that was pressing down on him, it was his own inner fear, his doubt, his unresolved guilt. The trial of will had forced him to confront those dark parts of himself. But now, facing this ancient being, Thomas could feel the pressure of those unresolved emotions weighing on him again. "You've been here too long," the woman said, her voice sharp. "You've allowed this place to consume you, to twist you into something that you were never meant to be. And now you will be defeated." The creature's eyes flashed with rage, and in a single movement it lunged toward her. But Thomas, feeling something stir within him, stepped forward, his hand reaching out. He wasn't sure what drove him. Perhaps it was the fear, perhaps the courage, or perhaps something deeper within him, but as the creature's form blurred toward him, Thomas raised his hand. The world around him pulsed, and for the first time, Thomas could feel the power of the world responding to him, acknowledging him as its rightful heir. He wasn't just an outsider anymore. He was part of this place, and its power was his to wield. With a forceful gesture, the creature was thrown back, its form tumbling through the air like a rag doll. The air hummed with the energy of the world, and Thomas realized in that moment that he had more power than he had ever imagined. But the battle wasn't over. The creature was not defeated, it was only growing stronger, more determined. And Thomas knew that this confrontation was just the beginning. The true test was yet to come. He turned to the woman. "What now? What?" She looked at him with a quiet intensity. "Now we face the heart of this place, and we do it together, together." The energy of the battle still lingered in the air, crackling around them like static. The creature lay in the distance, its form slowly rising, its power reconstituting, but it had been forced to retreat for now. The woman, still glowing with the ethereal light, turned toward Thomas, her expression resolute but tired. The ground beneath them pulsed gently, as though waiting for the next move. For what was to come, Thomas's heart still raced from the confrontation, but beneath the adrenaline, he felt something else, something deep and heavy. The power that had coursed through him during the struggle had left him in a state of awe and disbelief. He hadn't just defended himself. He had bent the very essence of the world to his will. This place, this realm, its secrets had revealed themselves to him in ways he could not yet comprehend. "What now?" Thomas asked, his voice still heavy with the weight of the unknown. The woman turned to face him fully, her eyes softening. "You must understand that your journey is not just about mastering the power of this world. It's about understanding the true cost of it, understanding that this place is a reflection of who you are, who all of us are, at our core." Thomas frowned. "But how do I understand that? How can I even begin to understand this world?" "Have already begun," she said, her tone thoughtful, almost soothing. "The power of this place, the forces that have shaped it, are ancient. But more than that, they are not just external forces. They are reflections of the choices we make, of the paths we choose to follow. You are standing at the crossroads, Thomas. The path forward is yours to choose." Thomas felt a chill as her words settled in his mind. The crossroads. He had heard the phrase many times in his life, but now, standing here, it took on a far more profound meaning. He wasn't just choosing the next step in a journey. He was choosing his destiny, choosing the future of not just this alien world, but perhaps his own world as well. He looked out at the swirling landscape, the ever-shifting horizon, and for the first time, he saw the world not as an enemy or a challenge, but as an extension of himself. The decisions he had made had brought him here, but they had also shaped him. This world wasn't just some mysterious, otherworldly place. It was a mirror. It reflected everything he had been, everything he could be, every mistake, every triumph. And in this moment, he could see how it all connected. "Can I truly change things?" he asked, his voice almost a whisper. "Can I reshape this world, ... and myself?" The woman gave him a small, knowing smile. "You already have, Thomas. The trial, the creatures, the forces you've encountered, they are all parts of you. And now, you must decide how to move forward, how to wield the power that is within you." Thomas looked down at his hands, feeling the weight of the world and the responsibility upon him. It was both terrifying and exhilarating. The path before him was still uncertain, but for the first time, he didn't feel afraid. This was his moment, his chance to make a difference, not just in the alien world before him, but in his own life. In the choices he would make from now on, he took a deep breath, steadying himself. "I will use this power for good, for knowledge, not for destruction." The woman nodded, as if she had been waiting for that moment, for him to embrace the truth of his journey. "That is the right choice. But remember, Thomas, true power lies in understanding. That understanding comes from not just looking outward, but inward as well. The most difficult battles are not fought in the world around us, but within ourselves." For a brief moment, Thomas felt a deep, almost spiritual, peace wash over him. The trials, the struggles, the confrontations, they had all been necessary. They had pushed him to see the truth of his own soul. And now he understood. The power wasn't just about wielding force, it was about knowing how to use it. It's about balance, about making the right choices even when they weren't easy. With the woman by his side, Thomas turned toward the heart of the world, the massive, ancient structure that had loomed over them for so long. Could feel its power, but now it no longer intimidated him. It crossed the threshold, faced his inner demons, and chosen his path. The structure was not a prison. It was a gateway, a doorway to infinite possibilities as they walked toward it. The very world around them seemed to shift, responding to their every step. The glowing symbols on the stone walls began to pulse in rhythm with their movements. as if the world itself acknowledged his choice. With that, Thomas knew. The journey wasn't over. It was only just beginning. When they reached the entrance, the doorway loomed before them, dark and mysterious. The woman gave him one final look, her eyes filled with approval. "Are you ready?" she asked. Thomas didn't hesitate. He had made his choice. He had found his purpose. "I'm ready," he said. And as they stepped through the door together, the world around them exploded in light. The swirling colors of the sky melding into a brilliant white. The energy surged, and Thomas felt himself pulled forward, but this time there was no fear, no uncertainty. This was the beginning of a new chapter, a chapter where the greatest discoveries lay not in the stars or alien worlds, within himself.